What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another Yugi-Kaiba format video. In this video, I'm going to be showing off a version of the Umi tribal deck. I talked about this deck a bit in my last video, which was just going through all the different tribal strategies in Yugi-Kaiba. And I do think that this is the best field spell strategy. Basically, the goal of the deck is Umi turns Great White into an 1800 attack point monster. So if you're playing Umi and 3 copies of Great White, it's like you have 3 extra copies of Login in your deck. And that slight advantage can actually make a huge difference. So let's just dive into the deck breakdown. So of course we have Logins, Neos, and Battle Oxes in addition to our Great Whites, because these are the premier level 4 beaters of the format. You know, Great White plus Umi may turn into a Login, but Login on its own is a Login. So you definitely want to have those in the deck, and you also want to have your other beaters as well. 3 Great White because we want to make the most out of our Umi, and so we do play all 3 copies of this. We have 3 Giant Soldier of Stone, which can act as a useful wall to prevent our opponent from attacking in. And also 3 Man-Eater Bug to pop our opponent's monsters. Also, this, when combined with Ultimate Offering, which we are playing in the deck, can be incredibly useful removal on our opponent's turn. We also are playing a Summoned Skull to pair up with the 1 Change of Heart in the deck, also just to give us a big beater that can attack over our opponent's defense position walls or our opponent's big monsters. So it's good having at least one of these in the deck. You can also use it for like Ultimate Offering shenanigans if you so wish as well. For the spells, we of course have the Change of Heart that I just mentioned. We have all the other limited spells, Dark Hole, Monster Reborn, Pot of Greed, and Raigeki, all just incredibly good in pretty much every deck in the format. We have 3 Fisher to act as more removal. This deck can struggle with removing our opponent's monsters, so 3 Fisher is very nice in that regard. And we also have 2 Swords of Revealing Light to stall our opponent for a bit. This can be very useful when we, have Great Whites without Umi or Umi without Great Whites, and we want to get our quote-unquote combo online as soon as possible. And then we have 1 Umi. Now, Umi is basically the central idea of this deck and combining it with Great White, so you might be wondering why there's only 1 copy. And as a note, I'm playing only 1 copy because I like just 1 copy in the deck, but you can definitely play 2. I wouldn't necessarily say 3, but 2 is respectable. And actually, in the original incarnation of this deck that I saw, which was created by Janjo, who is another Yugi tuber, and I will link to their video where they talk about building this deck in the description, they actually do play 2 copies of Umi, which is a perfectly respectable choice. It's just if you draw both copies of Umi, then you basically have a useless card in your hand. Yes, your opponent can potentially have a D-spell that they'd want to use on your first Umi, but that's a really edged situation. And most of the time, it's just better not to brick on the Umi in the first place. So that's why we're only playing 1 copy, even if it does mean that it's a bit tougher to actually assemble both Umi and Great White at the same time. Then we have the traps. 3 Reinforcement, 3 Trap Hole, 3 Wuboku. Pretty standard in any deck that's going aggro. Wuboku protects your life points and your monsters. Trap Hole acts as removal on your opponent's turn. And Reinforcements acts as removal as long as you have a monster. And given the amount of basic beaters that we're playing, it will most likely be online. The last trap we have here is an Ultimate Offering. And this could be where sort of you add in the second Umi if you want the second Umi. Ultimate Offering can be very good in this sort of aggressive deck though, because it can enable your monsters to dodge a trap hole. It can enable you to get a lot of monsters on the board in 1 turn, to just have a ton of damage on field. And so it's just a pretty good card in this sort of aggressive deck. For the side deck, we've got 3 Trap Master to deal with our opponent's trap-heavy strategies like stall decks using Ultimate Offering. We have 3 Wall of Illusion to side in against more Soul Control decks. We have 2 Summoned Skull, 2 Soul Exchange to side into a Soul Control package against more stally decks as well. We have 1-card Destruction for Exodia. And then we have a funny, spicy side deck package in the form of 3 Dragon Zombie and 1 Wasteland. And the idea behind this is you can swap in the 3 Dragon Zombie for your 3 Great White and the 1 Wasteland for your Umi. And then you basically go into this deck, but with a different monster. Now, I mentioned in my previous video that I do think Wasteland Tribal is slightly less good than Umi, as it does buff your opponent's Giant Soldiers of Stone. But, you know, I've seen a lot of Great Whites in side decks, and so if someone's like, oh, they're playing Umi Beatdown, I can side in Great Whites of my own to capitalize on that. This can throw them for a loop, as, you know, Wasteland will not give a benefit to Great White, and they'll just be playing an inferior beater in their deck while you're playing Dragon Zombies as your substitute for Login. Now, whether this is a smart side decking strategy, you know, up in the air. I think, honestly, you could probably fill these in with some better cards, but it's funny, and if you manage to pull it off, it's like the best feeling in the world. So that's why we have it there. But anyways, now that I've done the deck breakdown, let's dive into some games with this deck. Okay, we got a game against Real 3D 2018 here. We've exchanged the good luck, have funds, and now we're jumping in. So we got rock, they got scissors, so we are going to pick first. And first, top card of our deck is Umi. You know, we're just that good. So if we ever draw a Great White, then we'll have the combo online, which is very nice. We don't have any traps in this hand, though, which is kind of unfortunate. But we do have a Defender and Giant Soldier of Stone, so we can just set that, set 2, and pass back to them. They're going to set 2 of their own and pass back to us, and we draw another sword, which isn't necessarily what we want to see here. We have a couple options here. We can summon up Battle Ox and attack into their set. We could flip up our Giant Soldier and attack into their set. We could Swords of Revealing Light, whatever monster they have, and then Fisher it away potentially. A bunch of different options. I think the best strategy here would honestly be just to flip up the Giant Soldier of Stone, attack into their set. If it's a wall, we could potentially Fisher it if we want to, or we could just activate Swords of Revealing Light to prevent them from getting over our Giant Soldier, because we do have another one all ready to go. So I think that would be the best play. And if it's a bug, that will just pop our Giant Soldier, which will enable us to summon out the Battle Ox as follow-up. So I do think that just flipping up the Giant Soldier and attacking in is the best play, especially because if we Swords of Revealing Light and it is a Man-Eater bug, then they will be able to pop our monster. If it's a Defender, it would be great because we could Fisher it away and just attack in, but it's a bit too risky. So I actually think the best play is just to flip up the Giant Soldier and attack in. We do not do the best play, though. We think about it for a while, and then we go for the inferior play, by my opinion, Swords of Revealing Light. And we will get punished for it because that is a bug. So they will be able to pop our Giant Soldier, which is unfortunate. We can bring out the Battle Ox, and that's fine by them, which is good for us. We'll be able to clear the Man-Eater, pass back to them, and that's 1 on the swords. And they don't have anything to do, so that is pretty nice. So we will be able to just get in for some free damage here. We'll be able to set a reinforcements for if they ever do have a wall, or if they have like a Login or something, and pass back to them. So we're feeling pretty good about this. Unfortunately, they do have a Fisher, so we will lose our Battle Ox. And Ultimate Offering's okay. We can set it, but we would have liked some offensive pressure there. And our Swords is now expired. Trap Hole's a good draw, though. This can let us just get rid of whatever monster they summon out. So that's pretty nice. We'll pass back to them. They're going to Swords of their own. I guess they don't have any monsters to capitalize on our empty board, which is very nice for us. So we're going to draw. We don't have any monsters either, so we're going to pass back to them. They finally draw a wall, so they're just going to set it, pass back to us. we draw reinforcements, and we could have set the reinforcement in our last spell and trap card zone. However, that would then prevent us from activating spell cards, so we don't necessarily want to do that. They're just going to tribute off their Giant Soldier Stone for a Summoned Skull, and we're just going to trap hole that. That's like prime trap hole material, so we are just going to clear their Summoned Skull. And oh, we have the combo online, Umi plus Great White. So we'll be able to bring out a Lodgin. That's not actually a Lodgin on our next turn. We could do that now, just activate Umi, summon out Great White. But then they could just Fisher it, or they could trap hole it, or a variety of other things. So we will save this for when we can actually attack. We are going to set one. We're going to set the reinforcements because we have cleared up a spell and trap card zone. So we still have one available to activate spells. But the storage will finally expire. They will Pot of Greed, which is very nice for them. And they're going to bring out a Neo. And they're going to attack in. We could Ultimate Offering bring out the Manure here if we so choose. However, Great White plus Umi will be able to clear that Neo just through an attack, which I think is a bit better. We can save the Manure bug for something like a Summoned Skull or a bigger threat. So we will just let this attack go through. They're going to set one pass back to us. We draw a Manure bug, and we're going to play it safe. If they have a trap hole, you know, Great White would be a great trap hole target. So we are just going to flip up Ultimate Offering, activate Umi, and then activate Ultimate Offering at Chain Link 2 to summon out the Great White in a way that dodges trap hole. And now we've got an 1800 attack point monster on field. We can clear that Neo and then just pass back to them. And in addition to having this 1800 attack point monster, we also have 2 Man-Eater bugs in hand. So if they do manage to clear this and summon another monster, we can just set one with the Ultimate Offering and pop another thing. So we're feeling pretty good. They do clear our Great White, which is very unfortunate. But it did get pretty good value here. They will bring out a Battle Ox, and they will try and attack in, but we will set a Man-Eater bug and just pop their Battle Ox. We draw a Neo of our own, and we'll just summon that. We could have potentially tried doing Ultimate Offering shenanigans, like bring out a Man-Eater bug as well to block the Neo from this trap hole. But honestly, we don't really want to fill up our board, and the only other way to sort of avoid a trap hole with the cards that we have would be to activate Sword of Revealing Light and then chain Ultimate Offering to it. And frankly, we want to save the Sword for when we need it. So we will just die to the trap hole here. We figure it's not that big of a deal anyways because this is a Neo, which is like, we've got essentially 5 copies of Lodgin left in our deck. So we don't really care too much about a 1700 beater dying. But die it will, and they will bring out a Neo of their own, try and attack in, and we could trigger the Ultimate Offering here to set the bug, or we could just wait a turn and Fisher away the Neo. And it looks like we're going to go for the bug, pop their Neo, pass back to them. We draw another spell that we can't use. So we're just going to pass back to them again. I don't really think that it's likely that they can kill us next turn. Sure, they can reborn a Summoned Skull and then just normal summon out a Lodgin. But I don't think that that's likely. And I'm willing to take the gamble. I'm willing to just wait it out. And they do not kill us, which is very nice. We are going to activate swords, and we could chain Ultimate Offering to this. But, you know, if it's a bug, then that would be really bad. So we're activating the swords because we think it's a bug, because otherwise we think that they would probably have attacked here. Unfortunately for us, it is a giant soldier, so we won't get it to pop itself. But we do have a Fisher on field, so we will be able to activate this and chain Ultimate Offering to the Fisher to avoid trap hole with our Battle Ox. and we'll be able to attack in for 1700, and we'll pass back to them. They have a D-spell, so they will be able to pop our swords. Now, there's debate when playing against field decks to use D-spell on the swords or use D-spell on the field spell. I think here, using it on the swords is a better swing in tempo. I think in general, yeah, you can just wait until your opponent actually has like a great white on the field to actually use D-spell on the Umi, because that way you can potentially clear it without your opponent expecting you to be able to clear it. So I do like just not immediately popping the Umi with the D-spell. And I do think it's good to use it here. Just you get a sort of swing in tempo this way that I'm not expecting. And they will be able to bring out a Lodgin and try and capitalize on that swing in tempo. However, we do have a reinforcement set, so we will be able to protect our Battle Ox from that Lodgin and manage to just keep a monster on field. And we drew Summon Skull, which is incredibly nice given the change of heart that we have already in hand. So we will be able to pull off that combo. And Battle Ox will attack in. They'll take 17. And we'll pass back to them. They will soul exchange our Battle Ox, which is fine by us because we do have the Fisher. We also just have the change of heart here. So we will just change of heart. Try and attack in for game. And it's revealed that that is Oluboku. So we won't be able to get game. We will be able to tribute off a Summon Skull. We see that they've used up 2 Fisher, so it's not the most likely thing in the world that they'll have another Fisher in hand to deal with this. So we're feeling okay about that, and we'll just pass back to them. They're going to change of heart the Summon Skull and reborn a Summon Skull of their own. So this would be lethal. However, we will be able to use Ultimate Offering here to set the Lodgin that we just drew. So that way, you know, we will only take 2,500 from the attack. And at the end of the turn, we will get back our Summon Skull. They have no back row, so actually this will be the end of the game here. We will be able to Fisher away their Summon Skull and just attack directly for game. So that was game 1. And we actually did get to see the Umi plus Great White actually do something, which is very cool to see. Sure, it only managed to clear 1 Neo before being Fishered, but it caused the opponent to use up a Fisher, and it caused them to lose a Neo. Both of which, you know, were resources that they wouldn't have lost otherwise if we didn't have the Umi to pair with the Great White turning into a Lodgin. And you could argue that, you know, over time, that loss of advantage did actually win us this duel. So that's pretty nice. Also, as a note, you know, I talked about how Ultimate Offering could be the flex spot if you wanted to swap back in an Umi. I think if we actually had the Umi in deck in place of Ultimate Offering, we would have lost this game because it just would have been dead in our hand pretty much the entire game. And Ultimate Offering helped us a lot over the course of that game. It helped us dodge trap holes. It helped us bring out Manure Bugs during our opponent's battle phase, dodging removal. It was just incredibly, incredibly good. And if that was just a dead card, I think I would have a hard time seeing how we'd win that. Now, of course, one game is not the make or break in this sort of discussion or debate about whether to include more than one Umi or include Ultimate Offering and all that jazz. But, you know, it is something to think about, and it is one more piece of data that you can mull over when making that decision, though. For game 2, we are actually just going to go for the meme because you know, in deciding whether to side into the Mimi Dragon Zombie plus Wasteland side, you generally want to see, you know, if your opponent immediately just is done siding or not. Because if they're immediately done siding, then it's likely they didn't side anything at all because they're just underestimating your deck. So in those cases, it's not good to side into the Wasteland Dragon Zombie stuff because they probably didn't side in their own Great Whites. However, I do remember from this duel that our opponent did take some time to side. And, you know, that doesn't necessarily mean that they were adding Great Whites. They could have been swapping other things in their deck or just trying to give the illusion that they were trying to side into things or not. But, you know, we're just looking for an excuse to play the Wasteland Dragon Zombie side deck package, and we'll take it. So we do actually side into the Wasteland and Dragon Zombie stuff. So let's see how that does for us. Our opponent will choose to go first here, and so we are playing second. And this is not a bad hand, especially when they just set one and pass. It's likely that that's probably a trap hole, so we are just going to bring out a Neo and try and get in. I mean, if it is a trap hole, they don't use it, so we are able to get in 17, which is very nice. And we will be able to back up our Neo with a Reinforcements and Woboku. So we're feeling pretty good about that. Our opponent will summon out a Neo of their own, and they'll try and attack in. We have the choice here of choosing to either Reinforcements or Woboku. I actually think that Woboku is probably the better option here because it does just destroy their Neo. But it's good to have safeguards, and Woboku can also just be great at making sure you just don't lose all in one turn. So we will go for the Reinforcements here. Again, I think I probably, in hindsight, should have gone for the Woboku, but both are respectable. And so our opponent will lose 5 there and just activate his swords to close out the turn. So we won't be able to capitalize on this. We're just going to set a bluff and pass back to them. They're going to Pot of Greed, summon out a Battle Ox, and attack in. Now here again we have the option of Wobokuing to protect our Neo. Since we have another 1700 beater in hand though, we actually decide not to. And we'll just let both our monsters die and pass back to them. We draw swords of our own and we could activate it here. But we're just going to try and summon out a Lodgin instead. That Lodgin will be met with the trap hole. So it does look like they did have the trap hole. And we're just saving it for a bigger threat, which I think is very respectable. And that does come back to bite us here. So we will lose the Lodgin, pass back to them. They'll bring out a Neo, and they will attack in. We'll take the 17. And we draw Trap Hole, which is, we would have liked to have drawn that sooner. We'll bring out the Battle Ox, set 1, pass back to them. And they will soul exchange our Battle Ox, which is best case scenario for us. Because now we have an empty board and they've got a full one and we have Dark Hole in hand. So we will be able to Dark Hole this board if we so choose. We don't though, because we want to save it for a point that we can actually capitalize on this with a monster in hand that we can summon out after. So we're just going to swords. If they dispel the swords, that'd be rough, but we do have Woboku, so we can block that for a turn. And so we'll just swords and pass back to them. They'll set 1, pass back to us. Change of Heart's okay. We'll save it for later. And we do draw a monster finally. It's Giant Soldier of Stone though, so it's not the best offensive threat. However, 1300 damage with 1300 damage. They're unlikely to trap hole this, and we do have swords up for 1 more turn. So worst comes to worst, we can always just switch it back to defense mode after swords expires. So we are going to Dark Hole here and bring out a Giant Soldier. They're fine with that, and we will attack in for 13. And they will take it. Pass back to them. They'll bring out a Battle Ox, fine by us. We still have swords up, so they won't be able to attack in here. And the swords will expire. We'll bring out a Lodgin, and that will be okay. So we will hopefully be able to clear the Battle Ox. And we do. Okay. So we'll get in for 1300 more. We are exposed to a board wipe here, but I do think that was the right play. You know, part of it was baiting out of reinforcements, because if they did have reinforcements, they'd probably use it there. And then we could switch the Giant Soldier to defense, having used up their reinforcements. So I do think this was the good play, despite playing into mass board removal. And they do have mass board removal. Raigeki. So we will lose our board. And they do have a Monster Reborn to follow that up with. And just get in for a ton of damage. Pot of Greed is probably the best thing that we could have drawn there, although those are not two good ones. We're going to bring out a Battle Ox, and we will be able to Fisher away their Summon Skull. So we will be able to get in for 17, and they're down to 1400, so we're feeling pretty good about this. But they do have a Fisher for the Battle Ox, and they will just set one pass back to us. I think that's fair. Wasteland is not necessarily what we want to see. If we do draw Dragon Zombies down the line, then that will be very good. But right now, it can't really help us. So there's not really much we could do here. If we're willing to bet that that's not Waboku, we could change of heart their monster. And if it's a Giant Soldier of Stone, we could activate the Wasteland and go for game, I guess. But that's a bit high rolly. So we're just going to set another trap hole and pass back to them. The reason we're setting another trap hole is if that's a set monster that can actually do some damage and they try flip summoning it, we can trap hole it and then also have an additional trap hole for their regular normal summon. It is a, well, maybe not super big beater, but it is a beater that can deal some damage. So we will trap hole it and they'll pass back to us. Reborn is great. We can just threaten lethal here. So that's what we'll do. We'll grab back a Summon Skull and try and attack in for game. Unfortunately, they do have Waboku, so nothing we can do about that. They bring out a Giant Soldier. And, you know, we have to think here. We could trap hole it just to clear it out of the way. Leave an empty board for us to attack into. We do have the Waboku, so we're not really worried if they do have like a change of heart to try and get in for exact lethal. So we will just let that go. We can always clear it with the Summon Skull if they don't get rid of Summon Skull. And we can change of heart their Giant Soldier and go for game, you know, next turn as a last case scenario if we really do want to go for lethal. But they do have the change of heart and they will try and attack in. We will be able to Waboku this. And we will be able to attack in for 12, which they will take. So they're down to 2, so they're in a really rough spot. We're just going to set 2 and pass back to them. They're going to set 1, pass back to us. We could probably change of heart here to wrap up the game. If that's a man or bug, we can just have it pop itself and attack him with Summon Skull. If it's a Giant Soldier, then at least it's clearing the way to attack in with the Summon Skull. However, since that could be a Waboku, we want to save the change of heart for later. So we will just summon out a Giant Soldier. We will attack into their set. They'll pop the Giant Soldier. So we won't be able to get in for lethal. And they do have Soul Exchange. So they will be able to use that. We will just trap hole. And they'll pass back to us. Fisher's not necessarily the best draw here. So we'll just set it and pass back to them. They'll set 1, pass back to us, and we finally draw a monster. So let's see. Whoop, we accidentally misclicked there. We will summon out the Battle Ox, try and attack in, and unfortunately, they did not have anything here. So that's going to be the game, and you'll see that, like, the field spell stuff didn't really come up in game 2 at all. It was just sort of like a back and forth aggro game. We just did not draw the pieces that we needed to get that online. And as such, Wasteland was kind of like a dead card in our hand for a lot of it. Or at least for the tail end of it. But that can happen when playing these sorts of decks, you know. Generally, this field spell package, I think, is going to be like 4 or 5 cards. And when it's that small a portion of your deck, there are going to be some games where you just don't draw into the pieces to actually use it. Or when you just draw into one of the pieces and not the other. And while that can be fine if you just draw like a Great White or a Dragon Zombie, if you draw the field spell without the appropriate monster to pair with it, it can be a bit more rough. And this is also why I sort of advocate for just having one field spell in deck. Because, you know, it's bad enough if you just draw the 1 and it doesn't do anything. If you draw 2 at the same time and you don't have any of those monsters that can benefit from it, then it's just 2 dead cards in your hand that you can't use, that you can't do anything with, and it can be really rough. So that's just another reason why I like just one field spell in the deck. But I hope you enjoyed seeing what little field spell action we did get to see in game 1. I know that you might have been hoping for more just out there field spell plays with like great whites coming down every turn and all that stuff. And you might be disappointed that it just turned out to matter with like one play in game 1. But I think that that one play in game 1 was super important. And I think that it actually did a lot for us. And I think it showed off some of the strength of this sort of field spell type of deck. As another note, it also did something that equipped spells can't do, because we were able to chain Ultimate Offering to the activation of the field spell to bring out the Great White and dodge around Trap Hole. Whereas if we were playing equipped spells, you can't equip anything to an empty board. So we wouldn't have been able to do that sort of Ultimate Offering chaining shenanigans. So that's a unique little neat sort of interaction that you can do with this deck. But I'm going to also try showing off this deck a little bit more on the channel. Probably not too much more, because it is like a bit jank. But I am going to show it off in the next video as well. So look forward to that if you enjoy this sort of deck. But until then, I've been Ben with YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.